The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the French Ministry of Defense, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Marie Dubois walked through the corridors with the measured steps of someone who had learned to be invisible in plain sight. At 38, she possessed the understated elegance common among Parisian professionals, her dark hair pulled back in a simple chignon, wearing a tailored navy blazer that spoke of competence without drawing attention. To her colleagues at the ministry, Marie was exactly what her personnel file indicated, a highly skilled translator and interpreter specializing in North African dialects and military terminology. Her linguistic abilities were exceptional, her work ethic impeccable, and her demeanor professionally pleasant but reserved. She had worked in the ministry's translation services for 5 years, handling sensitive communications related to France's operations in the Sahel region. What none of them knew was that her expertise in military terminology wasn't academic. Every phrase she translated, every operational briefing she interpreted, carried the weight of lived experience in the very conflicts she now documented from behind a desk. Marie settled into her usual position in Conference Room 7, preparing for the weekly Sahel Operations Coordination meeting. As the ministry's senior translator for the region, she was responsible for ensuring accurate communication between French commanders and their international partners. Her notebook was open, pens arranged with military precision, and her expression set in the neutral professionalism that had become her shield. General Philippe Moreau entered the room with his characteristic swagger, followed by a retinue of staff officers and intelligence personnel. At 55, Moreau commanded respect through a combination of political acumen and carefully cultivated military gravitas. His uniform bore the ribbons and decorations of a successful career, though those who knew the details understood that his combat experience was largely theoretical. Mesdames et Messieurs, General Moreau began, settling into his position at the head of the conference table. Today we review Operation Harmattan, our enhanced counter-terrorism initiative in the Tri-Border region. Marie's pen stilled for a moment at the name. Harmattan, the hot, dry wind that swept across the Sahara, carrying dust and desolation. The irony wasn't lost on her. 5 years ago, another operation in those same endless dunes had carried its own destruction, leaving 6 soldiers to die under the merciless desert sun. As Moreau launched into his briefing, Marie translated mechanically, her mind split between the technical requirements of her role and the memories that threatened to surface whenever discussions turned to desert operations. She had developed exceptional compartmentalization skills during her years of hiding, but certain triggers remained dangerous. Our intelligence indicates increased activity among terrorist networks operating in the Liptako-Gourma region, Moreau continued, gesturing to a map that showed the borders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. We're coordinating with regional partners to establish monitoring posts at strategic locations. Colonel André Thorne, one of Moreau's senior staff officers, leaned forward. General, what's our extraction protocol if teams encounter overwhelming resistance? Marie's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around her pen. The question was routine, standard operational planning. But the phrase, extraction protocol, carried weight that no one else in the room could understand. Standard NATO procedures, Moreau replied dismissively. Teams maintain communication schedules and follow established evacuation routes. Simple enough for any competent commander. Simple enough. Marie forced herself to continue taking notes while suppressing the bitter irony of that statement. Nothing about extraction from the Sahara was simple when political considerations outweighed operational necessity. For the next hour, the meeting proceeded with the bureaucratic efficiency that characterized modern military planning. Intelligence assessments, resource allocations, coordination protocols, all discussed with the detached professionalism of staff officers who would never feel desert sand between their teeth or taste the metallic fear of abandonment. As the meeting neared its conclusion, General Moreau stood and moved to the front of the room. Before we adjourn, I want to address something that's been brought to my attention by our partners in the region. Marie's attention sharpened. Something in Moreau's tone suggested a departure from the scheduled agenda. There have been reports of unauthorized personnel attempting to infiltrate our operational areas, Moreau announced. Individuals claiming to have knowledge of past operations, possibly seeking to compromise current activities. Marie's blood turned cold. Around the table, staff officers exchanged concerned glances, but she kept her expression neutral despite the racing of her heart. These individuals often display detailed knowledge of military procedures, Moreau continued, sometimes even specific operational protocols that should only be known to authorized personnel. He paused dramatically, clearly enjoying the attention of his audience. Which brings me to a demonstration of how we can identify genuine military personnel from imposters. Moreau smiled with satisfaction. Most civilian contractors and even some lower-level military personnel don't understand the subtleties of unit-specific traditions. Marie felt a chill of premonition as Moreau stepped into the center of the room. For example, the Foreign Legion has unique marching cadences that vary by regiment and operational history. These aren't published in manuals or available to casual researchers. Moreau began to demonstrate a rhythmic hand and foot pattern, the distinctive tempo used by Legion units during desert operations. But as Marie watched, her training kicked in automatically. The pattern was wrong, incomplete, missing the crucial finishing sequence that identified specific operational units. This particular cadence, Moreau explained, was used during classified operations in the 2010s. Only Legion veterans who participated in those operations would know the complete sequence. Marie's body tensed as muscle memory threatened to override her carefully maintained facade. Every instinct honed by years of Legion training screamed at her to complete the cadence properly, to demonstrate the precision that had been beaten into her during countless hours of desert drilling. Of course, Moreau continued with casual confidence, since these operations remain classified, it's unlikely anyone in this room would recognize the significance of what I'm demonstrating. The arrogance in his voice was unmistakable. He was showing off, using classified knowledge to emphasize his own importance while dismissing everyone else as civilians and staff officers without real operational experience. Marie found herself standing before she realized she had moved. The conference room fell silent as Marie rose from her chair in the back corner. All eyes turned to her, the quiet translator who rarely spoke during meetings except to clarify technical terminology. Her movement was fluid, controlled, bearing the unmistakable precision of military training that no amount of civilian camouflage could entirely hide. "General," she said, her voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there moments before, "you're missing the terminal sequence." Without waiting for permission, Marie stepped forward and began to demonstrate the complete cadence. Her movements were flawless, each gesture crisp and purposeful, flowing from muscle memory that had been carved into her by years of Legion discipline. The rhythm was complex, a combination of hand signals, foot positions, and timing that told a story only those who had lived it could understand. General Moreau's face went pale as he watched her complete the sequence he had deliberately left unfinished. The casual confidence drained from his expression, replaced by a growing alarm as the implications of what he was witnessing became clear. The 14th and 15th measures, Marie continued, her movements becoming more precise, indicate desert operation status and unit designation. The 16th through 18th specify extraction protocols for high-risk environments. She completed the full cadence with a final gesture that caused several officers in the room to lean forward in recognition, those few who had enough operational background to understand what they were seeing. That particular sequence, Marie said, her voice now carrying the crisp authority of command, was specific to units operating under Operation Sirocco protocols in the Central Sahara region, 2019 to 2020. The room was absolutely silent. General Moreau stared at her with dawning recognition and growing fear. Operation Sirocco had been classified at the highest levels, its details known only to those directly involved in its planning and execution. "Who are you?" Moreau demanded, his voice strained. Marie removed the clip from her hair, allowing it to fall naturally around her shoulders. The change was subtle but dramatic, the efficient civilian translator disappeared, replaced by someone whose bearing and presence commanded immediate attention. "Captain Marie Dubois," she replied, her voice steady and clear. "3rd Company, 2nd Foreign Infantry Regiment. Operation Sirocco Team Leader, presumed killed in action along with my entire unit 5 years ago." Colonel Thorne dropped his pen. Other officers around the table exchanged shocked glances, some beginning to stand as they recognized the magnitude of what was happening. "That's impossible," Moreau said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Captain Dubois died in the Sahara. The entire team was lost to equipment failure and extreme weather conditions." Marie's expression hardened. "Equipment failure? Is that what you call denying extraction to a team under fire because acknowledging our presence would have complicated your political negotiations with regional partners?" She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a folder that she placed on the conference table. 5 years of patient work, General. 5 years of translating your briefings, listening to your justifications, watching you build a career on the bodies of the soldiers you abandoned. General Moreau's face flushed with anger and fear. "This is preposterous. Security." "I wouldn't," Marie said quietly, but with unmistakable authority. "Because several people in this room have clearances high enough to verify what I'm about to share, and I suspect they'd be very interested in the contents of this folder." Colonel Thorne, who had remained silent during the exchange, stepped forward. "Captain, if you are who you claim to be, how did you survive?" The official reports indicated total loss of contact in a region with no possible rescue capabilities. Marie turned to face him, her expression softening slightly. 14 months, Colonel. 14 months moving only at night, avoiding both enemy patrols and French reconnaissance flights. Living on what I could scavenge, treating my own wounds, making my way to an extraction point that was never going to come." She gestured toward the folder on the table. "I documented everything. Enemy positions, resource locations, operational intelligence that could have been valuable if anyone had cared enough to listen." "But why return like this?" Thorne asked. "Why not report through proper channels?" Marie's laugh was bitter. "I tried proper channels, Colonel. Upon reaching the embassy in Algiers, I was immediately classified as a security risk. Questions about Operation Sirocco were deflected, delayed, and eventually buried under classification protocols that made it impossible for me to seek accountability." She looked directly at General Moreau. "So I decided to seek accountability through other means." Marie moved to the front of the conference room, her bearing now fully that of the Legion officer she had been. The transformation was remarkable. The quiet translator had completely disappeared, replaced by someone whose very presence commanded respect and attention. 5 years ago, Operation Sirocco was presented as a counter-terrorism reconnaissance mission, she began, addressing the room with the precision of a military briefing. 6 Legion operators inserted into the Central Sahara to establish observation posts and collect intelligence on weapon trafficking routes. She activated the room's projection system with the familiarity of someone comfortable with military technology. Images appeared on screen, satellite photos of desert terrain, operational maps marked with coordinates, and photographs of equipment that most of the civilian staff officers had never seen outside of training manuals. "Our mission parameters were clear," Marie continued. "Establish covert observation posts, monitor trafficking routes, collect intelligence on foreign weapon supplies reaching terrorist networks in the region. Duration, 6 weeks. Extraction, predetermined coordinates with backup locations for emergency situations." General Moreau shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Several other officers leaned forward, clearly fascinated by details of an operation they had only heard referenced in classified briefings. The team consisted of experienced Legion personnel, Marie said, clicking to the next image, a photograph of 6 soldiers in desert camouflage, their faces turned toward the camera with the casual confidence of professional operators. Sergeant Chef Laurent Rousseau, our demolition specialist. Caporal Chef Amadou Diarra, communications. Caporal Yann Leblanc, medic. Legionnaire Jean-Baptiste Cohn, reconnaissance. Legionnaire Sophia Petrov, sniper. And myself as team leader. Marie paused, her composure momentarily affected by seeing the faces of her fallen comrades. The room remained silent, sensing the weight of what they were witnessing. For the first 4 weeks, everything proceeded according to plan, she continued. We established 3 observation posts, documented extensive trafficking activity, and collected intelligence that proved the involvement of state actors in supplying weapons to terrorist networks. Colonel Thorne interrupted carefully. Captain, was this intelligence transmitted to command? Daily reports, Colonel. Encrypted communications following standard Legion protocols. We provided detailed intelligence on trafficking routes, weapon types, and most importantly, the involvement of supposed allied nations in supplying advanced weapons to terrorist organizations. Marie clicked to the next slide, showing communication logs with timestamps and encryption codes. This intelligence created significant political complications. Evidence of Allied involvement in weapon trafficking threatened ongoing diplomatic initiatives that General Moreau was personally invested in. Moreau finally found his voice. You have no understanding of the broader strategic picture. Individual operations must sometimes be subordinated to larger diplomatic considerations. Marie turned to face him directly. Is that what you told yourself when you denied our extraction request? When you left 6 soldiers to die to protect your career advancement? She clicked to another slide, a communication log showing extraction requests and denials. Week 5, Day 2. First extraction request after completing primary mission objectives. Denied due to ongoing operational requirements. Week 5, Day 4. Emergency extraction request after taking casualties during enemy contact. Denied due to weather conditions and operational security. Week 6, Day 1. Final extraction request, transmitted while under direct fire, with 2 critically wounded team members. Denied because extraction would compromise ongoing diplomatic initiatives. The room was silent except for the hum of the projection equipment. Several officers stared at the communication logs with growing understanding of what they represented. Marie's voice remained steady, but emotion finally began to show through her professional composure. Sergeant Chef Rousseau died on Week 6, Day 3. Shrapnel wounds that became infected because we couldn't risk moving to our medical supply cache. Caporal Chef Diarra lasted until Week 7. Bullet wound in the abdomen that our medic couldn't properly treat with field supplies. Caporal LeBlanc, our medic, died on Week 8 trying to save the others. He gave his medical supplies to keep the rest of us alive as long as possible. Marie paused, struggling to maintain control. Legionnaire Cohn and Legionnaire Petrov survived until Week 10. By then, we were no longer a military unit. We were refugees in our own operational area, avoiding both enemy forces and French reconnaissance flights that might have saved us if anyone had cared to look. Marie clicked to the next slide, revealing satellite imagery of the Sahara marked with movement patterns and timeline annotations. The technical precision of the documentation was evident. This wasn't emotional testimony but professional intelligence analysis. After losing radio contact with command, I made the decision to attempt self-extraction, she continued, her voice taking on the clinical tone of an after-action report. The surviving team members were too weak to travel. I left them with what supplies remained and began moving toward the nearest potential extraction point. The room remained silent, captivated by her account. Even General Moreau seemed transfixed, though whether by the story itself or the implications for his career remained unclear. 14 months, Marie repeated. Moving only at night to avoid both enemy patrols and French surveillance assets. Living on what I could forage, treating infected wounds with improvised medical supplies, navigating by stars when GPS became unreliable. She clicked to another slide showing rough map sketches and handwritten notes. I documented everything. Enemy patrol patterns, cache locations, potential extraction points. Intelligence that could have been valuable if anyone had been interested in retrieving it. Colonel Thorne leaned forward. Captain, you said you eventually reached an extraction point. How did you make contact with French forces? Marie's expression darkened. I reached the embassy in Algiers after crossing 3 international borders on foot. 14 months after my team was abandoned, I walked into that embassy expecting to be debriefed and to provide the intelligence we had died collecting. Instead, I was detained as a security risk. Questions about my identity, my survival, my knowledge of classified operations. It became clear very quickly that my survival was more of a problem than a success. She clicked to another slide showing embassy documents and security reports. I was told that Operation Sirocco was classified beyond my clearance level, that discussing it with anyone would result in charges for revealing state secrets. They offered me a new identity, a pension, and relocation to Canada in exchange for signing non-disclosure agreements that would prevent me from ever discussing what happened to my team. General Moreau shifted uncomfortably. Operational security requires. Requires what? Marie interrupted. Requires abandoning soldiers in the field. Requires covering up their deaths to protect diplomatic initiatives. Requires intimidating survivors into silence. She gestured toward the folder on the table. I spent 2 years studying the diplomatic negotiations that my team died to protect. Arms deals with supposed allies who were simultaneously supplying weapons to the terrorists we were fighting. Commercial agreements that prioritized resource extraction over regional stability. My team died so that General Moreau could avoid acknowledging French military presence in a region where we were conducting unauthorized operations in violation of international agreements. The weight of her accusation hung in the air. Several officers exchanged glances, beginning to understand the broader implications of what they were hearing. Marie clicked to the final slide in her presentation, a timeline showing the correlation between Operation Sirocco's abandonment and subsequent diplomatic successes that had advanced Moreau's career. 3 months after my team was declared killed in action, General Moreau was promoted to his current position. 6 months later, he received a commendation for successful diplomatic coordination in the Sahel region. 1 year later, he was awarded the Legion of Honor for exceptional service to French national interests. She turned to face Moreau directly. Built on the graves of 6 Legion soldiers who were sacrificed to protect your political ambitions. The silence in the conference room was absolute. General Moreau's face had gone from pale to gray, and several staff officers looked as though they were witnessing the end of careers they had thought secure. Marie remained standing at the head of the table, every inch the professional officer she had once been. "You can't," Moreau said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "The classification levels alone have been reviewed by the Senate Intelligence Committee," Marie interrupted. "Appropriate declassification orders have been issued for testimony purposes. The committee has determined that accountability for soldier welfare supersedes operational security classifications." Colonel Thorne stood abruptly. "Captain, you're alleging systematic abandonment of French military personnel for political purposes. These are extraordinarily serious accusations." "Yes, they are," Marie agreed. "And they're backed by 5 years of documented evidence, testimony from other survivors, and analysis of operational patterns that show deliberate disregard for soldier welfare." She gestured toward the folder. "Financial records showing commercial benefits derived from diplomatic successes that required abandoning military operations. Communication logs proving that extraction requests were denied for political rather than tactical reasons. Medical records of survivors who were intimidated into silence rather than debriefed properly." General Moreau found his voice again, though it shook with anger. "This is treason. You're betraying classified operations, compromising national security, destroying careers of dedicated officers. I'm seeking accountability for the deaths of soldiers who were abandoned in hostile territory," Marie replied calmly. "If that threatens your career, General, perhaps you should have considered the consequences before making decisions that prioritized your advancement over soldier welfare." She picked up one of the documents from the table. "This communication, sent 3 days after my team's final extraction request, shows you authorizing media statements about successful diplomatic progress in the exact region where you had abandoned 6 soldiers to die. You held press conferences celebrating diplomatic successes while my teammates were dying of infection and exposure in the desert." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Several junior officers stared at General Moreau with new understanding of what they were witnessing. Colonel Thorne stepped forward. "Captain, What exactly are you hoping to achieve with this revelation? Marie turned to face him. Accountability, Colonel. Changes to operational protocols that prioritize soldier welfare over political convenience. Recognition for the soldiers who died because their lives were considered less important than diplomatic negotiations. And justice for the families who were told their loved ones died in equipment failures and weather incidents, when they actually died because extraction was denied for political reasons. She paused, emotion finally breaking through her professional composure. Sergeant Chef Rousseau had a daughter who was 8 years old when he died. She's 13 now, and she still doesn't know that her father was abandoned by his own command. Caporal Chef Diarra's wife remarried believing her husband died in an accident. She deserves to know he died fighting for intelligence that was too politically sensitive to justify rescuing him. Every family deserves the truth about how their loved ones died. Not the sanitized version designed to protect the careers of the officers who abandoned them. Marie straightened again, her voice regaining its military precision. Tomorrow's testimony will include recommendations for operational reforms, accountability measures, and recognition for soldiers who have been abandoned by their commands. It will also include specific evidence of criminal negligence in command decisions that prioritized political outcomes over soldier welfare. General Moreau was on his feet now, his face flushed with anger and desperation. You're destroying decades of careful diplomatic work. The regional partnerships, the counterterrorism cooperation, the stability we've built. Built on the graves of abandoned soldiers, Marie finished. Stability purchased with the lives of people you were supposed to protect and support. She gathered her documents. The hearing begins at 0900 tomorrow, General. I suggest you contact your legal representation. The following morning, the Senate Defense Committee hearing room was packed with military officials, journalists, and government representatives. Marie sat at the witness table in her dress uniform, the first time she had worn French military insignia in 5 years. The transformation from civilian translator to decorated Legion officer was complete and undeniable. Senator Claire Dupont, committee chairwoman, called the session to order. This extraordinary hearing addresses allegations of systematic abandonment of French military personnel in classified operations. We have an unprecedented witness today, Captain Marie Dubois, formerly presumed killed in action, who has allegations regarding Operation Sirocco and related missions. Marie stood and approached the witness microphone with perfect military bearing. The cameras captured every detail, the Legion insignia on her uniform, the combat decorations on her chest, the quiet dignity that marked her as a professional soldier. For the record, Senator Dupont continued, Captain Dubois was declared killed in action 5 years ago along with her entire unit. Her survival and subsequent allegations have prompted this emergency hearing. Captain, please explain to the committee how you come to be here when official records list you as deceased. For the next hour, Marie provided a comprehensive account of Operation Sirocco, the abandonment of her team, and her subsequent infiltration of the Ministry of Defense. Her testimony was precise, documented, and devastating in its implications. The extraction requests were acknowledged but denied, she testified, presenting communication logs to the committee. Not because extraction was impossible, but because acknowledging our presence would have compromised ongoing diplomatic negotiations. She displayed the timeline correlation between her team's abandonment and subsequent diplomatic successes. General Moreau received career advancement and recognition directly resulting from diplomatic progress that required sacrificing my team. Senator Dupont studied the documents carefully. Captain, you're alleging that French military personnel were deliberately abandoned for political purposes? Yes, Senator. And Operation Sirocco was not an isolated incident. Marie presented evidence of additional operations where similar decisions had been made. Pattern analysis shows systematic disregard for soldier welfare when rescue operations would compromise political objectives. General Moreau, present with his legal counsel, attempted to defend his decisions. Senator, these operations required difficult choices in complex political environments. Military commanders must sometimes make tactical decisions that prioritize larger strategic objectives. With respect, General, Marie interrupted, there was nothing tactical about denying extraction to soldiers who had completed their mission objectives. The decision was purely political, designed to avoid acknowledging French military presence in regions where such presence violated international agreements. She presented financial records showing commercial benefits derived from the diplomatic successes her team had died to protect. My teammates died so that French corporations could secure resource extraction agreements in the regions where we were conducting unauthorized operations. The hearing continued for several hours, with technical experts and intelligence officials providing context for the operations and subsequent cover-ups. Throughout it all, Marie remained composed, answering questions with the clarity and precision that had once made her an exceptional team leader. As the session neared its conclusion, Senator Dupont addressed her directly. "Captain, beyond accountability for past actions, what reforms are you recommending?" Marie straightened in her chair. "Mandatory extraction protocols that cannot be overridden for political considerations. Independent oversight for classified operations to ensure soldier welfare is protected. And truth for the families who have been deceived about how their loved ones died. Most importantly, recognition that soldiers are not expendable assets to be sacrificed for diplomatic convenience. They are human beings who deserve the support and protection of the institutions they serve." 3 months after the Senate hearing, Marie stood in her dress uniform before the Legion Memorial at Aubagny. Around her gathered the families of the fallen Operation Sirocco team, seeing her in person for the first time since learning the truth about how their loved ones had died. The ceremony was small but significant. 6 new names were being added to the memorial wall, no longer classified, no longer hidden behind euphemisms about equipment failures and weather incidents. Laurent Rousseau's teenage daughter approached Marie after the formal recognition. "Captain, my father wrote about you in his letters home. He said you were the finest officer he'd ever served under." "He was the finest soldier I ever served with," Marie replied softly. They all were. General Philippe Moreau had resigned in disgrace following the Senate hearings. Several other senior officers faced investigation for their roles in abandoning military personnel for political purposes. More importantly, new protocols had been established requiring independent oversight for extraction decisions in classified operations. Marie had been offered various positions within the French military, but she had chosen something different. She now worked with families of soldiers lost in classified operations, helping them navigate the bureaucracy to learn the truth about their loved ones' service and sacrifice. The work was difficult but necessary. Every family deserved to know their loved one had died serving France, not that they had been abandoned by France. As the ceremony concluded, Marie placed Legion insignia beneath each name on the memorial wall. The small pins represented more than military decoration, they represented truth, accountability, and the recognition that every soldier's life had value beyond political calculation. Senator Dupont approached as the crowd dispersed. "Captain, your testimony has prompted a comprehensive review of military operations accountability across all services. Change is happening." Marie nodded, looking at the memorial. "Change won't bring them back, Senator. But it might prevent other families from experiencing what these families have endured. The lies, the cover-ups, the treatment of soldier deaths as acceptable casualties of political ambition, that has to end." She turned from the memorial. "Some missions continue long after the operation is officially over. Mine evolved from seeking survival to seeking justice to ensuring protection for those who serve. For Operation Sirocco, I was the only one who made it home. For future soldiers, I want to be part of the reason they all make it home." As the sun set over the memorial, Marie rendered a perfect salute to her fallen teammates. Behind her, every person present, including Senator Dupont and several senior military officials, stood at attention, returning the salute not just to the wall, but to her. The quiet translator who had spent 5 years hiding in plain sight had become something unexpected, a bridge between the soldiers who served and the institutions that commanded them, ensuring that accountability and truth would guide future operations. Her war was finally over. Her mission of protecting those who serve had just begun, Have you ever wondered how many people around you might be carrying hidden stories of service and sacrifice? Share your thoughts in the comments about the importance of accountability in protecting those who serve our countries. Subscribe to Silent Legends for more stories of courage that deserves recognition.